education here with our families and a special guest to talk about something that's near and dear to everyone in our community, the education of our children. We have the state's attorney, Miss Angela Alsobrooks. Give it up for her. Give her a hand. Yeah.
Thank you.
Something I've been waiting to tell you since we set this whole thing up. You on with the husbands. So we just came off of hearing you.
Let me say, this is the best audience I have ever been in. I mean, look,
they are excited.
They are
excited. But I did.
they're excited because we're talking about their education,
That's
right?
right.
Yeah,
That's
that's what's up.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And we just come
Well,
off
that's
of we just come off of hearing about your education rollout,
Yes.
and something that I heard you say that got me really excited, which was making it about the kids. So many times when we talk about education, you said this: it's all about who's in charge, who's in power, who dealing with the adult side of it, but dealing with the kids. You know, that's something that's near and dear to me. And I just kind of want to for us to come and have a conversation about the things that we want as parents, as students, just all together as public servants, coming together and talking about it, because you yourself are a parent, and you have some of the same concerns that we have. What would you say are your major concerns, even coming from the perspective of a parent?
Well, one of the things that I had a chance to talk about it a moment ago really is the morale of the school system.
Oh,
So when we talked about not talking about kids first, that is something that is of so much concern to me. And I think it should be. That every
Absolutely.
conversation we have about education has to start with what is best for children.
Absolutely.
We go from there to talk about their parents and their teachers.
Mm-hmm.
That, to me, those are the three most important parts of any education: these students, their teachers, and their parents. And so really keeping the focus there is important. But the morale of the school system is something that's been of concern to me. I have watched us politicize the education of these children in a way that I think has done great harm to our system. To be frank with you, I'm sick of seeing it on Fox 5.
Oh,
I am. I
absolutely.
want our
Absolutely.
children not to look on the television and to see the dysfunction that has been such a core part of our system. It is harmful to our children. It's harmful to our school system. It's harmful to our county. And so we have to really refocus the conversation around education. And I think when we do that, when we start asking ourselves, first off, what's in the best interest of these children, then we get to the right answer and to the right solutions. And so that's going to be something that is important to me, is making sure that it's all focused on kids. What's best for our children.
Yeah, and you said something. As morale, and especially the kids being excited. My kids and I were having conversations because we have one that's going into high school, and
Know which one that
one is going into middle school.
is. Stacy?
That's right.
Stacey, yes.
That's right. That is Stacy, the daughter of Stace the speaker. But she
Stacy's ready. Stacy gave me eye contact and a shake.
She
She's
did?
ready. Yes, she
Oh,
is.
wow.
She is ready.
Yeah, you gonna get that dollar after this. No, but she's pretty serious. But I was talking to my son, and we're having conversations about what schools everybody wants to go to. My son said, I want to go to Largo like Dad went to Largo. And I think that the fact that how he hears, because we went to Largo, we're friends and we grew up there, and he hears all the stories and us having fun and just the different experiences from school. And that's giving him the impression of there being a lot of life and joy and, that being associated with the schools. We got to get that back to the kids. And sometimes I think, like, how do we get that? How do we get the kids excited about school again?
You said something that was so critical, and I have to really compliment you on this. Your son feels good about education because you do. So we can never undervalue parents.
Right.
It can never be overstated
Yeah.
how important it is to have parents as allies in their children's education. And so I think that you said it all right there.
Yeah.
Is that parents who are engaged, who talk about the value of an education, who are engaging in ways that their children can see, is so critically important.
Right.
And for families who do not have the ability to do that, because let's face it, there are some families who are struggling.
Yeah, that's true.
And in that case, we have to find a way as a community to make sure that every child is cared for.
Yeah.
So that means in the instances where families, for whatever reason, are not able to engage, that means that's when the faith community comes in,
Oh, yeah.
nonprofit organizations come in, businesses. And so we have to find a way to replicate in the cases where it's not possible what your children are receiving in terms of having a parent who is engaged in their education. There is no substitute Parents are their kids' first educators.
Absolutely.
And most important educator.
Yeah.
And when you find that you have an engaged parent, you will have a successful child.
You know, I was talking to Spencer earlier. He brought up a great point about just, like you said, the importance of the parents being the educators or our kids moving forward, right? And actually, I'll let you ask that question as far as our kids advancing in the classroom and moving our kids ahead.
Yeah, well, like Stacey was saying, we were talking about it, and there was a concern amongst myself and some other fathers and mothers in the community. We've been noticing that some of the kids seem to be getting pushed through. You know, and it's a concern. You know, we're not doing our kids any service, and you're saying how important they are not only to the family but to the county and to the world ultimately. With that concern, what are your thoughts? How are you approaching this if brought into office?
You know, what a disservice we do to our children when we don't prepare them. If you can think about the concept of sending a child into the world who's unprepared, that's how I feel about pushing children through any system. And so we have an obligation that we can't reassign to anybody, and that is an obligation to make ready our children to face the workforce and to provide for themselves and to contribute to their communities. And that means that we can't cut steps. It means that we have to insist on rigor and a certain standard that we will not go beneath. I think that, and I've heard this said, that there's bigotry and low expectations. And we ought to be clear that there's bigotry when we say that our kids cannot reach a certain standard. Of course they can, if we make the standard clear. And so I think that we have to change the culture in our school system that says that there are certain standards below which we do not go. And that we have expectations of our kids, and that's rigor. That means also in terms of character. And I don't think that it's inappropriate for us to say so. We understand as adults that you can't be successful unless you have certain character. That my father taught me a long time ago that your character on any given day will outpace your abilities. And so sending kids through a school system who are not only not academically prepared, but who don't also have the coping skills and have the life skills to navigate is critically important. So no, we won't. We do not want to skip steps. But we also don't want to push anybody through. You think about just, what does that say about us?
And what's that going to do for the character?
What is
exactly.
it
Right. If I know, if you know you can get by, then yeah.
And not for long though, because then the world steps in.
That's right.
So maybe you get by in that school system, but you go out into a world that you are unprepared to navigate. And you know what? And we as a community will deal with the effects of that for a long time.
That's true. That was one of my favorite things that you said about character and teaching that, teaching that aspect of it in the classroom. And then you were talking about in the county and bringing businesses to the county and them having the expectation that our kids are prepared. And, all of those things work together. And I was really impressed with that part of it because that's important to me too,
It is important. We're developing these children for the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're also developing our community. These are the young people who will lead our community going forward. We have the expectation that when we're going to be older, right?
That's right.
Quickly. Don't laugh. Listen, they're going to laugh at us. But we have the expectation that they will be ready to take us into the next century. And it was no exaggeration when Amazon said to us, we wondered why they selected Washington, D.C. They were selecting the site for the second headquarters.
Right, that's right.
And Prince George's County made an application, and we were passed over. And they said that they did not see a pipeline, that we were not preparing our kids in terms of the STEM field to be able to take the jobs. And so we don't want that to happen.
No, absolutely we
don't.
don't.
We want to be able to encourage business to come here by saying, guess what? We have a workforce that can handle the jobs that you will bring here.
Yeah. I want to pass it over to Ro. Ro, you brought up a good point.
Touching on what you said about being prepared, I heard you talk about early childhood education and how important that is, and I totally agree. I find that my sons, when they were younger, when they went to preschool, and when they got into kindergarten and things like that, they felt better about themselves because they kind of had a leg up and they knew what they were doing. And how sometimes we do our kids a disservice if we're not putting them in preschool, so when they get to kindergarten, they're not prepared. I wanted you to kind of elaborate on that.
Yeah, one of the things I've come to understand as a mother is that how difficult it can be for some families. And so when I talk about pre-K education, I talk about it not just from the standpoint of making sure that the kids have what they need, but also that we provide support to families. Our system in so many ways is archaic in that we don't provide education until 5. which assumes that mothers don't work, and many mothers do now work.
Yeah.
So having pre-K education is best for children, but it's also best for families. Making sure that we have child care and the education that your sons were able to receive prior to kindergarten is expensive.
Yes.
And we have to recognize that there are some families who can't afford it. They just can't afford it, and this is an issue that I've worked on as state's attorney. Affordable child care is an issue. It really is an issue, and working to have affordable care for our kids, but education at 3 and 4 years old is critically important to make sure that our kids don't show up behind. Because I did not realize this until I heard from a few educators a few years ago that they said there's a test that they administer to students who come to kindergarten that determines whether you're ready to learn. And that some large percentage of the students they tested for kindergarten, I think they gave me over 50% who did not have access to the kind of schooling that your children did, do not test ready to learn for kindergarten.
Wow.
So this is a problem. But like I said, I think that we have to approach all of these issues with a certain level of understanding and realizing that for some families, in other words, so that we're not judging families who have not been able to provide that kind of education, because the truth of it is some can't afford it.
That's true. That's
Some
true. A lot
can't
of us
afford
are
it.
we're doing the best we can.
We are. Yeah, I went to
Yeah.
someone's house named Mrs. Smith when my grandparents took care of me a lot when I was younger, but I remembered as a real young kid, there was a family in the apartment complex. We lived in Shady Side Gardens over in Suitland. And when I was a kid, because my parents were young, when they had me and my sister, and we went to Mrs. Smith's house. And that's what my parents could afford.
That's right.
You know, and so making sure we're not judging families who don't have access to the things that we can afford, but making so that every family has the same opportunities to provide for their kids.
Speaking of opportunities, behind every good husband up here, we have good wives. And I wanted to give some of the wives opportunity to ask questions, because the truth is, you know, we're our own little community, and we do have these conversations amongst ourselves about the things that we want for our children and things that we see. And definitely, I know that the good Spans, his wife's here, and I know she has a question. Angie, what you got for us?
Hello, Ms. Alsobrooks. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. Thanks for coming.
You're welcome. I think you made a lot of good points with the education policy, and I know you mentioned when you were speaking about how some educators from local community colleges voiced to you how a lot of remediation has to take place, and I can speak firsthand to that because I work at a local college, and I can see that I work for the math department, and the largest percent of the student population are in remedial classes, and a large percentage of those students come from Prince George's County. So it scares me as a parent that this county isn't doing what they need to do to prepare the children for college, to be college ready for the students that are college bound. And so with everything that you mentioned with the resources, the smaller class sizes, which will require more teachers for hiring, so that's more money in the budget, pathways, more rigor, social workers, training, better facilities, all these things. Where is the funding coming from? Is it only coming from the Kerwin Foundation that you mentioned? Or what happens to the money that was promised from the MGM, the casino, and everything? So how is the funding going to be provided for all these things that are needed for our county to have better schools?
That's a great question. And you know what? I point to 3 streams of revenue that will be critically important. The first are those Kerwin Commission dollars. Those are going to be critically important. The formula, the state uses a formula as to how much money each jurisdiction should get. And as I mentioned in the policy rollout, 3 of the areas they look at are the number of disabled students, the number of students who speak English as a second language, and that free and reduced lunch. For Prince George's County, as I mentioned, out of two of the 3 of those, we have the highest in the state. So we have the largest number of disabled students and the largest number of students who speak English as a second language. This means that the funding that has to come to Prince George's will be adjusted, and we expect that funding will be adjusted upwards of $500 million. So those are some of the dollars, and the Kerwin Commission has as one of its primary recommendations lower class sizes, and so they recommended that the funding that will come will go to that. In addition to the Kerwin dollars, we also will be looking at the lockbox legislation that you mentioned, meaning that out of those 6 casinos that have been built in the state, that the money that comes from the casino here, MGM, goes into a lockbox. And this year, the legislators are passing legislation that will now require that those dollars can only be used for education. In other words, part of the concern was that the money went to an education trust fund. but that the governor could decide to use it for the general fund, transportation, road improvements, that kind of thing. But now that with this new lockbox legislation, there's actually a constitutional amendment being made that says that that money cannot be substituted for any other purpose. And so those are dollars that we look forward to taking advantage of. There's $643 million in money that came from the 6 casinos last year alone. So we expect that those dollars will be significant, and they will assist us with the things we need. The third stream of revenue that we have to really focus on in our county is increasing the commercial tax base. This is huge for us, and it's something that we have to really talk more about. We have got to increase the commercial taxes in Prince George's because we have on the backs of residents look to pay for education and public safety and all of those things. Because here, 70% of the tax revenues that Prince George's County takes in every year are residential taxes. Only 30% of the tax revenues are from commercial taxes. That's the exact opposite of what we have, for example, in Montgomery County, where they rely 70% of their tax revenues come from businesses, commercial taxes. Only 30% of their taxes are residential taxes. So we are at a huge disadvantage. That means that we're going to have a really keen focus on business development and really working to improve our economy. It's going to be critically important to make sure that we have the dollars we need, but really increasing that commercial tax base is going to be important. I'll say the last example, I was really surprised to learn recently when we talk about the power of having those revenues. The District of Columbia spends $4 billion every year on social services alone. That's our entire budget for Prince George's County. Prince George's County's entire budget is $4 billion, and the District of Columbia spends $4 billion a year only on social services. They spend $2.5 billion on education, and they only have 80,000 students. And so, so that just goes to show, and it's because they have that robust, they also get money from the federal government, but they also have, as all of us have noticed, if you go into the district now, the business is booming. So that's why it's in our best interest to really have an eye on what do we do to increase business taxes here.
Yeah. I want to give the kids a chance. You have a question in the back? You have a question for Ms. Alsobrooks? Yes?
Listen, that's why we got to listen to the kids. They'll tell us what's really important. He said, y'all have been talking, and he has another need.
Like,
he got another need. See, that's why we love the kids. Yes, sir.
You want to pass on the mic.
In my class, wait. How am I gonna say this? In my school, I've been noticing that fidget spinners that they banned they somehow banned the fidget spinners, even though they can actually help students with whatever they help them from. So what do you think of that? Like, do you think they should keep fidget spinners in the building, or do you think they? What are you?
Well, that's one of your concerns. But I also heard you talking about with your brother the PE situation, how you only get to have PE and recess in certain days of the week. At least that was last year. Did that change this year? Is it physical education just once a week?
Oh, that's a problem.
No.
How often? It's twice a week.
Yeah, twice a week.
Right. Well, so what are your thoughts on increasing?
So thank you for your question. You know what? And the fidget spinner, I'll start with that one. And I agree with the administration in terms of making sure there are no distractors. Every student won't use the fidget spinner in the same way. And we just want to make sure that there's no distraction, that nobody is preventing you from being able to learn. And so that's what that is just to make sure that we do things that are in the best interest of everyone. And they probably noticed that it wasn't helpful to everyone. So I think that was probably a good decision. In terms of physical education, it is absolutely critical that our students have robust physical education programs, arts programs. Again, all of these things are not apart from your education. They're a part of your education. So I would like to see not only an increased focus on physical education and health and wellness, but on sports and athletics to make sure that our kids also have access to the facilities that they need to participate in sports. My daughter was a member of a team here called PG Pride. It's a lacrosse team. And I was so disappointed to learn that we had to go to Potomac, Maryland for her games because we don't have adequate fields here to play the games. And so that sent, I believe, to my daughter the wrong message. And the message that she received was that it's not good enough. That we don't, that Prince George's County, if she had to travel across the line and go someplace else to play a game, that said to her that where she lived wasn't good enough. And so we have to make sure that we are not only providing adequate facilities and playing fields for our kids, but that we're providing them the same opportunity that other kids are. Athletics develops character. It develops also health and wellness, and these are things that our kids are deprived of if they don't have adequate physical education. So I agree with you in that concern.
Yeah, one more over here.
Thank you.
I wanted to add on for physical education because for our middle school, each 6th, 7th, 8th grade, we all get 1/4 of PE and every other day. So like sometimes we might be taking away to like testing or something. And I know middle school has sports, but everybody might not be able to play a sport because either there might be too many people or a team or homework and all that other stuff.
I think it is middle school is so challenging. I've kind of come to understand that my daughter's in 7th grade, and I understand that it is so challenging. And so you need, I believe, as many outlets and opportunities for exercise as possible. It's very stressful. You know, I don't know that we recognize that all the time as adults, but those middle school, adolescent years are really, not only are they critical to development, but they can be very challenging. So I really think that we need to focus on having the kids have what they need, and physical education is part of it.
Yeah. Well, I wanna thank take this time to thank Ms. Alsobrooks for spending, taking your time with us. No question was too small. I thank you so much for that. It's very important to us that you come. We are a family. We're a community. We're a community within the community. We are, we're together, and we are a part of Prince George's County.
And I'm a part of the family too. I want y'all to know that.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, come on now. I'm not outside the family. I think I want to put myself in the family too.
Auntie Alsobrooks 2018.
Yeah, you know what? This conversation is not just important to you, as you can tell from us coming together this way tonight. This is so important to me and to every Prince Georgian.
Yeah.
And this is also an issue that we're not going to be able to resolve without each other.
That's true.
Right.
So I think
That's
that
true.
we have to ensure that we are working together on it. And so the partnerships are going to be important, families, these kinds of discussions. But this is an all hands on deck issue, and it's going to take all of us. All of us to make sure we're moving forward.
Absolutely. Well,
thank you
thank
all.
you again. Give her a hand.
Thank you.
Give her a hand. Give her a hand.
Thank you for taking
Thank you.
out time from your spring break. You brought the spring break.
Yeah.
Who should be relaxing and everything, but they're here to talk about their education. So
And then we're excited to be here too. Excited.
you
I'm
all
sorry we
so
couldn't get to everybody's questions. She has to go. I'm sorry that we weren't able to. But thank you for participating. Thank you for everybody who tuned into this. Please share this. Talk about this. Get as many people involved in this discussion as we can, because we know that there are issues in our community, and we don't have to talk about how we're going to fix it. We do something about it. That's what these conversations are about. Find who your representatives are. Find out who are the people who are in charge. Go knock on their doors and have conversations, because this is how we bring change to our very own community. Thank you so much.
thank you all. Thank you so much.
Oh, well, absolutely. Thank you.